to all these liberal reporters, they keep calling him a Maryland man. He's not a Maryland man. He's part of a foreign terrorist organization. He's a member of MS-13, who, as you laid out in your monologue, came to this country and committed just gang acts. He was caught, and he was two judges, an immigration judge and an appellate judge, ruled that he was an MS-13 member.
But the Democrats want him back in their daughter's junior high school shower room. The Democratic Party is very unwell indeed. I do want to mention something, talking to Brad in New Orleans, and he's talking about all the fun that he had and avoided in Neo Orleans. And he said like 90 people were shot. We went looking to see if 90 people were shot. We found 5 people shot, because the place is full of Democrats. But just in case it might become the topic of conversation at the dinner table tonight, we have not been able to find 90 people being shot. That'd be a large number, to be sure. But that was Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of the United States, last night on the Fox News channel, pointing out that the news media, and I've been pointing this out as well, keep referring to him as a Maryland man, Abrego Garcia, a Maryland man, because he's lived illegally in Maryland for a while, and therefore he's a Maryland man. But in reality, he's a Salvadoran gang member who has been established as such repeatedly. Pretty amazing stuff. Also today in court in Florida, the would-be Trump assassin in court. I know which one, you say. Which one? Well, one in Butler, Pennsylvania was shot and killed. That was a suicide attack. And in West Palm Beach at the Trump golf course, he was taken into custody, and he'll be appearing in court today. Also in Wisconsin, a 17-year-old who murdered his mother and then murdered his stepfather because he wanted to steal their money so that he could assassinate Trump. That one is ongoing as well. The Democrat Party is inciting this and encouraging this and provoking this. And they're on the side of every illegal alien gang member. They claim he's a Maryland man mistakenly deported to his country. It is his. I'm surprised they called it his country. Isn't he an American through and through? Now that he's an illegal alien gang member inside of our border. The Democrat Party. Aren't they amazing? And they have this guy, Ken Martin. You know, Ken Martin. He's the chair of the DNC, and nobody's ever heard of him. He's apparently an incredibly dull and uninteresting person. And he's tweeting in support of illegal alien gang members. And President Trump, I'd say, his comments last night about deporting homegrown terrorists could have been more precise in his use of language, because I assume we're not talking about deporting U.S. citizens that were born in the United States and raised in the United States and generations of Americans and their family. But maybe the son, let's just say a son, of an illegal alien couple, and then he, one was awarded U.S. citizenship, but still a gang member from Venezuela or El Salvador. Can you strip that person of their citizenship and deport them? Or do we have to pay to put them in American prisons for decades? Because, you know, the Democrats have really made a mess of all of this. But you know, they're the Democrats. They opened up our borders, allowed millions and millions and millions of illegal aliens in, and pretty remarkable stuff. Your Democrat Party, they are not on our side. Yes, and Democratic lawmakers say they'll travel to El Salvador to push for Kilmore Abrego Garcia's release. Being spearheaded, which is racist, by Democrat Senator from Maryland, Chris Van Hollen. Oh, yeah, we want more. He's a Maryland man. He's an illegal alien who was living in Maryland. He knocked up a woman who now has a disabled child. Congratulations. The Democrats are making everything better. Yes, they are. All right, let's get back to the yesterday festivities. And the illegal alien. Let's go to number 9 because Stephen Miller was asked by President Trump to explain this whole illegal alien thing that they call a Maryland man. And the Washington Post front page, who was mistakenly deported. Stephen Miller took issue with that.
2 immigration courts found that he was a member of MS-13. When President Trump declared MS-13 to be a foreign terrorist organization, that meant that he was no longer eligible under federal law, which I'm sure you know, you're very familiar with the INA, that he was no longer eligible for any form of immigration relief in the United States. So he had a deportation order that was valid, which meant that under our law, he's not even allowed to be present in the United States and had to be returned because of the foreign terrorist designation.
And I should add, and also this goes to a nice conversation I was having with Clark, the green card and you're legally in the United States and all this, Mahmoud Khalil, Mahmoud Khalil, Columbia University and genocidal, racist, anti-Semite. If you conclude that he is affiliated with Hamas, and he is clearly advocating for Hamas, a genocidal, radical Islamic, jihadi terrorist organization, then I would be in favor of, having policies that allow you to expel people with terrorist groups from the United States, because we shouldn't be that stupid. And if you're part of, and that may include being a sponsor of, a supporter of, an activist in favor of Hamas in the United States, it's the same as being an advocate for Al-Qaeda or ISIS. And I think that even if you're here temporarily on a student visa or even a green card, you should be expelled from the country. You should be deported, kicked out of the country, catapulted into the ocean. You're out of here. And President Trump has designated MS-13 and Tren de Aragua as foreign terrorist organizations. And if you have an affiliation with a foreign terrorist organization, even if they're Venezuelan or Salvadoran gangs, that should make you eligible for expulsion from the country, too. And if you don't believe that's true and you don't agree with me, you're entitled to not agree with me. But it's something that should be debated in our country, because we shouldn't be openly committing suicide as a culture. But the Democrat Party loves Luigi Mangione and Kilmore Abrego Garcia and Victor Martinez Hernandez, and they love Mahmoud Khalil, and they love Carmelo Anthony, who stabbed to death a fellow student at a Texas track meet because it was self-defense. Yeah, he was going to beat him in the track meet or something. Just amazing stuff. You're a Democrat Party. But Stephen Miller putting out there, and the Attorney General Pam Bondi said the same thing. I already played that soundbite, saying that 2 courts, an immigration court and an immigration appeals court, both concluded 6 years ago now in 2019 that he was a member of MS-13, which has now been designated a foreign terrorist organization. The number of murders these gangs commit are off the charts. Stephen Miller wasn't done yet.
This issue was then, by a district court judge, completely inverted, and a district court judge tried to tell the administration that they had to kidnap a citizen of El Salvador and fly him back here. That issue was raised to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said the district court order was unlawful, and its main components were reversed 9-0 unanimously, stating clearly that neither Secretary of State nor the President could be compelled by anybody to forcibly retrieve a citizen of El Salvador from El Salvador, who again is a member of MS-13, which, as I'm sure you understand, rapes little girls, murders women, murders children, is engaged in the most barbaric activities in the world. And I can promise you, if he was your neighbor, you would move right away.
Now, the Democrats don't want criminals deported, criminal, illegal, alien, foreign gang members. They don't want them deported. They want them here and loose. That's insane. The chair of the DNC, Ken Martin, and who's the deputy of the? It's David Hogg, the school shooting activist of the Democrat Party, one of their child prophets, who they're using until they will spit out later on. But Ken Martin, the DNC chair, he is saying that we should deport Donald Trump because he was convicted in the phony Democrat New York City lynching trial. He was convicted of 34 felonies or something. And this poor, innocent, illegal alien MS-13 gang member, so say the courts, he should be allowed to stay, Kilmore Abrego Garcia. And then AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, saying the same thing at a radical left-wing rally where everybody paid a lot of money to get in, and she flies first class to go everywhere, and then complains about the oligarchy or something. And she, hero of the Democrat Party, is talking about running for Senate and getting Chuck Schumer's seat. She's talking about Donald Trump. He's a convicted criminal, not these gang members, right? Because she's not on our side.
So you don't plan to ask for any help to get him back?
And what was the ruling in the Supreme Court, Steve? Was it 9-0?
Yes, it was a 9-0.
In our favor?
In our favor, against the district court ruling, saying that no district court has the power to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. As Pam said, the ruling solely stated that if this individual, at El Salvador's sole discretion, was sent back to our country, that we could deport him a second time.
Well,
no version of this legally ends up with him ever living here because he is a citizen of El Salvador.
Or El Salvador. But the Democrats, they want to deport Donald Trump, who was born here and raised here. And President Trump should probably clarify the comments made yesterday in the Oval Office about deporting citizens. But again, if you come here as a foreign national, you get citizenship, and then you turn out to be a gang member because you lied on your application for citizenship and so on, then perhaps we should be able to strip that newfound U.S. citizenship away from you because you're a violent criminal and we want to get rid of you. Just a thought. Call me old-fashioned. Now, President Bukele was there. We did not play 12, correct? Okay. President Bukele of El Salvador there in the Oval Office with President Trump. And the Democrat from CNN, Caitlin Collins, is pushing now President Bukele. Won't you please return the illegal alien MS-13 gang member Kilmore Abrego Garcia back to the United States so he can be set loose here?
Can President Bukele weigh in on this? Do you plan to return him?
Well, I'm supposed to not suggesting that I smuggle terrorists into the United States, right?
It's always
how can I return him to the United States? Like I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
Well, I don't have the power to return him to the United States. He's a gang member in one of my prisons who came into the United States illegally. What am I supposed to do, smuggle him into the United States?
We're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country. I mean, we just turned the murder capital of the world into the safest country of the Western Hemisphere, and you want us to go back into the releasing criminals so we can go back to being the murder capital of the world? No, that's not going to happen.
They'd love to have a criminal, released into our country.
I mean, there's a fascination.
They would love it.
They would love it because the murder capital of the world was the president of El Salvador is saying El Salvador was the murder capital of the world. Now we become, what did he say, the safest country in the Western Hemisphere or something. But the Democrats, they're not on our side. They're just murder capital of the world. And he's like, we're getting stuff in shape here. And now you guys, the U.S. coming in to mess up what we've been successful in doing, and that is reducing the number of murders in our country. Like in Venezuela, their goal was to send all of their murderers to the United States from their prisons and their gang members and so on. Hey, are you a yo-yo dieter? You diet, you lose weight, but then you gain it all back again, plus a few pounds. Breaking free of your yo-yo diet pattern, one of the main reasons that doctors created Lean. Lean from Brick House Nutrition is a supplement. It's not an injection, and you don't need a prescription from a doctor either. Lean targets 3 weight loss areas, very powerful ways. It helps maintain healthy blood sugar levels. It helps you to control appetite and cravings. And it helps to burn fat by converting fat into energy. Listen, if you're tired of losing it weight and then gaining it all back again, Lean was created just for you. And let me get you started with 20% off when you enter PLANT20, PLANTE 20 at TakeLean.com. TakeLean.com. The code is PLANT20 at TakeLean.com. This statement product has not been evaluated by the FDA. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, prevent any disease, and is not a substitute or alternative for care from a healthcare professional. There it is. So we're getting there. The big Oval Office meeting there yesterday. A lot happened. A lot, and it really reveals the Democrat Party and the news media for what they are and whose side they're on, in case there is any lingering question in your mind. Chris here with a list of things that none of us should trust. The Washington Post, the New York Times, anything on CNN. Here's a list of things that I do trust. The Washington Times. Support real journalism for just $1 a week at WashingtonTimes.com/Chris. Joe Biden giving a speech in Chicago tonight. That should be funny. It'll be insane and angry. Also, talking to my friend Danny, and he makes a good point. You know, he's a Maryland man, the illegal alien gang member Kilmar Abrego Garcia. He's a Maryland man, another illegal alien and gang member, a Maryland man. The media calls him, the Washington Post on the front page. Another Maryland man, as the Democrats might call him, Victor Martinez Hernandez, was convicted yesterday of the rape and murder of a mother of five named Rachel Morin. Do the Democrats and the media call him a Maryland man? Because he is, to the same extent, a Maryland man, just as is the other MS-13 gang member, Kilmar Abrego Garcia. And the media and the other Democrats just refer to him not as a Salvadoran illegal alien MS-13 gang member, but simply as a Maryland man. And so applying the same standard, semantic, legal, intellectual standard that the Democrats applied to Kilmar Abrego Garcia, Victor Martinez Hernandez is also just a Maryland man, right? The fact that he's an illegal alien gang member from El Salvador shouldn't matter just because he's now been convicted of rape and murder and kidnapping, because that would be prejudicial, wouldn't it? A great American heavyweight passed away on Sunday in the Washington area. Richard Armitage, who was Deputy Secretary of State under Colin Powell when Colin Powell was Secretary of State. But Richard Armitage, a Vietnam War hero, a great American. He was Deputy Secretary of State, helped guide foreign policy in George W. Bush period, and central figure in national security from the Vietnam War until the post-9/11 War on Terror. And he died day before yesterday, April 13th, at a hospital in Arlington, Virginia. 79 years old, died of a pulmonary embolism. A lot of people around here know him, I know. And barrel-chested. They say, the Washington Post says, a vocabulary often closer to a sailor's than a diplomat's vocabulary. So he cursed up a storm. He was retired secretary, a deputy secretary of state. And the news media, they're still all about this unmasking CIA officer Valerie Plame because her husband was involved in sabotaging the Bush administration. And there was a leak, and Richard Armitage knew where it came from. And so the news media still, they try to flog you and punish you after death, post-mortem. And that's what the Washington Post is doing today. and their boy Warren Strobel. Hey, is it too late to malign Richard Armitage, who helped so many Vietnamese escape Saigon when Saigon was falling to the communists, and a great American and a fascinating guy. I met him a couple of times, not for a long time, but hadn't seen him around lately. Amazing guy. He was in Asia. He began his career. He was U.S. Naval Academy, became a naval officer, served 3 combat tours in Vietnam, and he had an amazing life and was an amazing. I think he bench pressed 400 pounds until he was like 70 years old. He was a big beast of a strong man, remarkable guy. Left the military in 1973, but he returned to Vietnam in 1975 as Saigon was falling, South Vietnam was falling to the communists because of the Democrats, by the way, in the United States. And he organized a mission to deny communist North Vietnam the use of American military machinery, including ships and airplanes and helicopters, and destroying the American equipment if need be. The exact opposite of what Joe Biden did on the catastrophic evacuation of Afghanistan and of Kabul, because the Democrats. Yes, sir. So Richard Armitage, day before yesterday, dying at the age of 79, pulmonary embolism, and sorry to hear that. Sorry to hear that. Pretty interesting guy, interesting life. I don't think the whole Valerie Plame thing was a big mistake or a big tragedy. That was a fake Washington pseudo-scandal in a thimble. But he did also, toward the end of his political activity, he declared that he would be voting in 2016 for Hillary Clinton rather than voting for Donald Trump, a lifelong Republican who said, I'm going to vote for Hillary Clinton because President Trump was not to his liking, not to his taste. But he did say, if Donald Trump is the nominee, I would vote for Hillary Clinton. I would vote for Hillary Clinton, he said. Served in the Reagan administration, and now whether he actually did in the end, I can't say, but he did say that in the media. I'm not going to hold anything against him. He's an amazing man with an amazing life. Remarkable lifetime, for sure. All right, so much still to get to, and the President Trump holding press conferences every time he gets on Air Force One, an amazing habit, sometimes at 2 a.m., which he did over the weekend. Remarkable stuff. But let's get back to the Oval Office meeting, because President Bukele of El Salvador in the Oval Office yesterday, and he said, well, listen, and I looked it up too, because it turns out El Salvador, and he said El Salvador went from being the #1 murder country in the Western Hemisphere to being having the fewest murders in the Western Hemisphere. And I looked it up, and actually in 2015, they became the murder capital of you have him saying that there's Bukele.
We just turned the murder capital of the world into the safest country of the Western Hemisphere, and you want us to go back into releasing criminals so we can go back to being the murder capital of the world?
I went and I looked it up, and it turns out 10 years ago in 2015, they were certainly a murder capital. They were having 103 homicides per 100,000 inhabitants. 103. So slightly more than 1 per 1,000 people. 1 in 1,000 were murdered in 1 year. All right? So 103 was their murder rate. And then last year, their murder rate was down to 1.9, fewer than 2. So, cutting it by not quite 100%, but from 103 homicides per 100,000 to 1.9 homicides per 100,000 is an enormous success story, a gigantic success story. And the likes of Senator Chris Van Hollen, the Maryland Democrat, they want to go down and visit too. They want to vilify and demonize the president who's trying to bring order from madness. And the Democrats not on our side, but President Bukele, number 13, right? Number 13. We're on to 14, Rubio. Oh, I apologize. Oh, that's right. Yeah. Is it? So you want us to, terrorize our country, make it the murder capital of the world again. We just got it into shape. The Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, was also in the Oval Office with both of the presidents yesterday.
I don't understand what the confusion is. This individual is a citizen of El Salvador. He was illegally in the United States and was returned to his country. That's where you deport people, back to their country of origin, except for Venezuela that wasn't refusing to take people back, or places like that. I can tell you this, Mr. President, no, the foreign policy of the United States is conducted by the President of the United States, not by a court. And no court in the United States has a right to conduct the foreign policy of the United States. It's that simple. End of story.
End of story. Marco Rubio speaking up these days as Secretary of State, and I think he's had a lot of very good moments in his short time as our chief diplomat and Secretary of State. That in the Oval Office to the news media, like Caitlin Collins on CNN, still clamoring for the return to the United States of an illegal alien gang member, MS-13 member, declared a terrorist organization. And the Democrats, and that means the news media, they're absolutely standing next to themselves. That's like being beside yourself. Standing next to themselves over the fact that this guy was deported because they want him back in the United States for some reason. Of course, they love Luigi Mangione, too.
Mr. President, you said that if the Supreme Court said someone needed to be returned, that you would abide by that. You said that on Air Force One just a few days ago. And they said that it must be facilitated.
Why don't you just say, isn't it wonderful that we're keeping criminals out of our country? Why can't you just say that? Why do you go over and over? And that's why nobody watches you anymore. You have no credibility.
You have no credibility. He's had enough of this. Caitlin Collins just hammering away again and again. Can't we bring illegal alien gang members back to the United States? Come on. We need more illegal alien gang members. We need a country to be more dangerous than it is. Aren't they amazing? Did you see the Bill Maher thing? Bill Maher, the HBO talk show host. Another Democrat, they pay millions and millions of dollars a year to do Democrat Party propaganda on HBO, Time Warner Company, same company that owns CNN, by the way. And there are no conservatives being paid millions and millions of dollars by any network anywhere in the United States of America. But Bill Maher is one of many, MSDNC, again, Rachel Maddow, $25 million a year after taking a $5 million pay cut from $30 million a year, who's doing one night a week on MSDNC. And Bill Maher, millions and millions on HBO. And we had Jon Stewart, who makes millions and millions to do one night a week because left-wing propaganda pays well. Boy, does it pay well. Somebody ought to do something about, I'll just say conservative truth paying well. That would be better. That would be better, too. Bill Maher, he's got a TV show. And he went and he had a meeting with Donald Trump that I think was set up by Kid Rock. Isn't that right? Set up by Kid Rock. And so Bill Maher went to the White House, and he said he didn't even get stoned. He's almost always stoned. But he said when he went to the White House to meet with Trump, it was a heavy lift for him. He tried to not get stoned for a little while. But Bill Maher explaining his meeting with Donald Trump at the White House.
Everything I've ever not liked about him was, I swear to God, absent, at least on this night with this guy. I never felt I had to walk on eggshells around him. And honestly, I voted for Clinton and Obama, but I would never feel comfortable talking to them the way I was able to talk with Donald Trump.
Wow. He's going to have his house firebombed with Molotov cocktails by liberals, I think. He voted for Clinton and Obama, but who is he to be sitting down with president after president after president? The guy who said that our fighter pilots were cowards, but on 9/11, the hijackers that crashed the planes into the buildings were brave, and they were heroes. He's a lefty up the yin-yang, and he said, everything I hate about Trump was absent. Well, then, so you've been wrong about everything. Is that what you're saying? You've been 100% wrong for years, and that's why Time Warner pays you millions of dollars to do propaganda for the Democrat Party. Bill Maher trying to explain himself and failing.
First good sign, before I left for the Capitol, I had my staff collect and print out.
My staff.
this list of almost 60 different insulting epithets that the president has said about me. Things like stupid, dummy, lowlife dummy, sleazebag, sick, sad, stone cold crazy. Really a dumb guy, fired like a dog, his show is dead. There's 60. I brought this to the White House because I wanted him to sign it, which he did.
That's funny. He used a black Sharpie, too, because he wants to have a good presidential autograph on there. Isn't that amazing? And then Bill Maher invited a radical left-wing extremist fake news reporter named Josh Rogan with the Washington Post. And he's on the Bill Maher show because it's a circle fest for the left-wing propaganda apparatus and their tentacles. The Democrat Party's propaganda tentacles are everywhere. Bill Maher talking to fake news reporter, fake journalist Josh Rogan of the Washington Post.
I think you've fallen into the trap. I think I represent 99% of the internet when I say this, is that you've played the game of proximity is principle.
What is the alternative to not talking? Just sit at your lunch table and don't talk to anybody?
I talk to him. I've interviewed Trump. Here's an interview.
That's just not an interview. This was not an interview.
I agree with the principle of engagement. I'm just saying from his perspective, you have to understand that people out there know, all Americans know, that for him this was a PR stunt, and in his view, you were a prop in that PR stunt.
A little smattering of applause. But wait a minute. For Bill Maher, it was a propaganda stunt. For Bill Maher, it was a PR stunt. For HBO, it was a PR stunt. And this Josh Rogan miscreant is just a disgrace. And then he did an interview after this being on the Bill Maher show. Oh, you were just used. Really? The Washington Post? How's that Russian collusion thing coming along? How's that Hunter Biden's laptop reporting is Russian misinformation reporting coming out? How's that Hillary can't lose and Trump can't win reporting coming along? How's the Trump couldn't possibly win again reporting coming along? How's your Joe Biden isn't feeble and frail and intellectually incontinent reporting coming along? Just amazing. And this guy, this fake Josh Rogan, he appeared on another. On with Piers Morgan, which might or might not be CNN, another, because who knows where he is now. But Piers Morgan talking to Josh Rogan because it's a circle fest in a hot tub, the propaganda of the Democrat Party, and it went like this.
You work for the Washington Post. Your owner, Jeff Bezos, has done a lot more than Bill Maher in crossing the divide with Trump. He used to be very critical of Trump. But in the last year and a half or so, he seems to have performed a massive U-turn on Trump. You can appreciate that if you're Bill Maher, watching you refusing to be remotely critical of what your own owner has done with Trump in terms of kissing the ring, you could potentially see that he might think there's a double standard there.
You know, I see what you're trying to do, Piers, but I'm not in a position to comment on Jeff Bezos, because if I comment on Jeff Bezos, then I could be fired from my job, and you know that. So I'm not going to do that.
Because he doesn't want to be fired, because he's Josh Rogan of the Washington Post, and he works for the centibillionaire Jeff Bezos, who has his own space program. What a phony that all-girl space thing was yesterday. You see him kissing the Earth like they, just came down from their fighter jets after a hot air-to-air battle with the Nazis or something. What a joke. What did they? It was like 11 minutes from launch to land or something, and they didn't actually make it to outer space. And I've done more adventurous things, driving my car in Washington. But never mind that. Yeah, so Joshua, well, I'm not going to be critical. I could be fired. Well, the truth is not something that I pursue. I'm not a moral person. Big news for Harvard University today, thanks to President Trump. That is coming up. Today is the anniversary of Abraham Lincoln dying from a gunshot wound inflicted by a Democrat and an actor. The anniversary of his being shot was actually yesterday, but he made it past midnight. like Robert F. Kennedy did. And he actually died on this date. Got the Democrat presidential assassination ball rolling. But there's an amazing story now, because President Trump has done something great. And he has announced he put conditions on Harvard and other universities getting federal tax dollars. And President Trump announced that Harvard would be denied $2.3 billion in federal taxpayer money. Money from cab drivers and nurses and school teachers going to fund Harvard. And Barack Obama, who went to law school at Harvard, very angry, where he was a terribly mediocre, uninteresting, unimpressive student, according to Harvard law professor emeritus Alan Dershowitz. But Obama furious that Trump's $2.3 billion Harvard freeze, and Obama calls it an unlawful attempt to stifle academic freedom. I think you guys have about $53 billion in the bank, and you got a bunch of billionaire sons and daughters littering your hallways with their anti-Semitism. And President Trump said, stop the rampant Nazi behavior, the anti-Semitism at Harvard. And Harvard said, no, we won't. And the Democrat governor of Massachusetts, they're the party of the American Civil War, and assassinating Abraham Lincoln and shooting Donald Trump in the ear and shooting Ronald Reagan in the chest and shooting at Gerald Ford repeatedly and on and on. But, $2.3 billion. Why are we giving $2.3 billion to Harvard this year? They have, I believe, a $53 billion endowment. Why are middle-class employees, construction workers, putting money into a kitty, if you will, a till, that then siphons off billions for Harvard University? It's time we put an end to that. You guys have to start paying your own way in the world. Maybe start charging more.